This podcast episode is brought to you by Your Wellbeing Promotion, a 6-month program with Alisha Leytem to overcome the overwhelm of jumpstarting your wellness journey. This program is for professionals who want to either recover from or prevent burnout with a customized wellbeing plan and ongoing support. It's also for leaders or coaches who want to learn how to embody well-being themselves so that they can coach and lead others to improve their well-being using the content and the techniques that they learn from this program. For working parents who have a lot on their plate and are feeling tired of being stuck personally and professionally and are seeking clarity and peace of mind. And finally, people who want to become more self-aware and learn the tools to handle stress better so that they can stop surviving and truly begin to thrive. This is a program that you are not going to want to miss. We are currently enrolling right now at a very low price. Head on over to AlishaLeytem.com. That's AlishaLeytem.com to learn more and enroll in the 6-month program with Alisha. By the end of the program, you will have improved your sleep, your diet, your exercise, your relationship with nature, and your mental, spiritual, and emotional health. You'll master the skill of knowing how to relax and regulate your nervous system. You'll improve your mindfulness skills and become a person who is both calm and successful. This includes coaching, a course on the 6 gold keys to well-being coaching models, and a community aspect. So head to AlishaLeytem.com to learn more and enroll today. You can get started right away. And now back to the show. Welcome to Unlock Your Wellbeing, the podcast that teaches you the simple keys to health and happiness so that you can grow as a human being into a well-being. And now here's your host, author, certified wellness coach, mother, and wife, Alisha Leytem. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. We have a really fun and exciting episode for you guys today. I know I say that almost every time, but this really is. You're going to have to trust me. We have the story of a lifetime that you're going to want to tune into today. So I have 2 guests with me today, and this is actually the first episode we've ever had 2 guests at the same time. One of them you will recognize. His name is Michael Leytem, and he is my husband. He has been on the show before, I think a couple of different episodes, right, Michael?
I think 2. It's been a while though. I'm happy.
I think 2. Actually, I think this is your first time on season 2. So welcome back.
Thank you.
But yes, you guys know him as my husband, sometimes podcast co-host, and we also do some business together. So I talk about him quite a bit in a lot of our episodes. As you know, I run Alisha Leytem Wellness, and Michael is the Chief Leadership Officer for my company, and then he runs his company called Catching Leadership. And then I am his Chief Mindfulness Officer. So we partner together quite a bit to bring our leadership and our mindfulness and well-being programs and trainings to, companies and organizations. In fact, we're doing a big one coming up here in January, beginning of January, right?
That's right.
In person, which is very exciting. So before we introduce our 3rd guest, we have to roll the stage out for you. Okay. So as you guys know, if you've been a longtime listener, you will know that we have a podcast editor on the team, and her name is Ainsley. Shout out to Ainsley. She has been with us since day 1 of the podcast, and the podcast came out just about a year ago, at the beginning of January of 2022. And so how I found Ainsley was I had been looking for an intern. And I reached out to my mom, who is a hairstylist. And as you know, hairstylists know a lot of people. And so I asked my mom, I said, "Hey, Mom, I'm looking for a local intern who could help me get my podcast up and going. Let me know if you have any connections of someone, who's a college student or whatnot." And I think like the next day or 2 later, she was like, hey, I have this friend who works for NICC, and she says that she has someone who would be really great. Her name is Ainsley. And so I interviewed Ainsley, not knowing her at all, right? I'm like, oh yeah, she's great, love her, she's in. Okay. So yeah, this was a year ago. Now, long behold, this has actually started an entire crazy stream of events. Okay. So when would this have happened? So earlier this year in 2022, after I hired Ainsley, her dad, what's his name?
Ryan,
right. Ryan, her dad, is also into fishing, which I did not know. Now we know that Catching Leadership is a leadership and consulting company that brings in elements of fishing. And so he looked up Michael's book, bought Michael's book, was really into it. And he grabbed another one because one of his good friends, Ryan, down the street, is also a fisherman and a leader. Okay. So he hands him this book one day and he says, hey, I think that you would like this book. And Ryan takes the book and he's looking at the back of it and he's like, wait a minute, how do I know this person? So I feel like at this part in the story, I'm just going to hand it on over to Ryan and Michael because you guys can tell it much better from here. So I'm going to introduce you to Ryan Tucker.
Well, it's great to be here, and I get chills, to be honest with you, and a little goosebumps when I hear you go through it, because that's exactly what happened. And I know Ainsley Heisey very well, and I know Ryan Heisey very well, and I'll get into the story. That's exactly how it started. I got a call from Ryan Heisey, who just happens to be a great friend of mine that lives down the road. And I mean, a couple miles down the road. And he's my team partner on all the bass tournaments that we fish together. And I've gotten to know Ryan basically from college and much better over the past probably 10 years. But we fish together all the time. And I get a phone call from him, which isn't unique, but he says, hey, I bought a gift for you. When you're in my hood, in the next whatever couple days, like text me and I'll come out to the truck and give it to you. I'm like, okay. So that piqued my interest, but I call him Gadget Guy because he always has these like just random gadgets, right? And he's brilliant. But so I go by and he hands me an Amazon package. So I was like, thanks. When I get home, I'll open it. And it happens to be a book. And the book is Catching Leadership by Michael Leytem. And I'm like, oh, and I had just taken a role, I've kind of transferred into a role as a director of sales over the West Coast for Simpler. And it was at a perfect time. I'm like, first of all, just by reading it and kind of reading like the forward part of it. And I was like, okay, this blends fishing into leadership. Like I'm on board. And if anybody that's listening to this that knows me, not a huge book reader. Just not, right? Like that's not how I consume stuff. But I was like, I am all on board. So I start reading it, but I keep looking at the last name of Michael's last name, like Michael Leytem. I'm like, I know this. And I read his bio and I'm like, he's from the same area where I was born. And I'm like, I'm going to have to do some digging. So I call my mother, Margene Tucker. And I said, do you know of a Michael Leytem, like Leytems? And she's like, well, your grandma Tucker, right, was a Leytem. That's her maiden name. I'm like, yes, that's right. That's right. So she did some digging into it and found out that Michael's grandfather was the brother of my grandma Tucker, who was Millie Leytem. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty crazy. We're cousins, but I'm going to kind of just continue to read the book, right? I don't want to be a complete stalker yet on LinkedIn. I'm just going to continue to read the book and go through it. I loved it. I loved everything about it. And I was in this period of kind of leadership and sales, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, a little bit later, but it just kind of brought a sense of energy about me to where I have a passion from a personal perspective around fishing and angling that really kind of stemmed from my grandparents, and more importantly from Millie Leytem, now Millie, like Millie Tucker. She was a big fisherman in our family. So as I go through this, I tell my mom, and I didn't know that this was going on, but she was doing more fact checking in the background. And she calls me, and I don't know, I want to say it was a week later. She's like, I'm going to blow your mind. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you know how you're related to Michael Leytem, you're reading his book. Like, that's really, really, really cool. And I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. I haven't reached out to him yet, but I'm going to. She's like, well, hold on, because I have more information. And so I'm like, okay, go ahead. She's like, well, so this is where I tell everybody I tell a story to, because I've told it a lot, because it's so important to me. And so it's going to get a little wild for our listeners, and it gets a little confusing. I'm going to do the best I possibly can. So my grandmother, I want to say it was 1993, but anyway, she was down visiting me with Grandpa Tucker. So Grandma and Grandpa Tucker were down visiting me and watching a basketball game. Unfortunately, she became sick when she was in Des Moines. She was in the hospital. She listened to all my basketball games, but she passed away in Des Moines. She never went home. Okay. So that left Grandpa Tucker, a widower, what we, call them. And so he is alone, right? But he has so many friends, so many family in that area, so beloved, that he was just an awesome guy. But he ends up meeting a woman by the name of Madonna Otting, who he knew because he was very good friends with her husband, who unfortunately passed away, I believe, around in his 50s. So she had been a widow in Cascade for a long time. Just an awesome, awesome lady. So they meet, they hang out, they get married. And her last name happens to be Otting.
My maiden name is Otting, everyone. It's actually, I changed my maiden name to my middle name. So Madonna Otting is my grandma.
So as I go, my mom tells me, so not only are you blood related, right, with Michael, you have a relationship with the entire Otting family because of Grandpa Tucker marrying Madonna, which we were both, Alisha, as you know, at their wedding. Okay. And unfortunately at their funeral, which was the most amazing funeral, if you could have one, from the amount of people that showed up and supported that was unreal, but just two spectacular people. I mean, actually, I'll talk about three spectacular people that had so much influence on me, but the dynamic, the fact that we're connected in both of those fashions, I could not ignore. This was just this moment where my head kind of exploded a little bit. And I was like, that's it. I'm reaching out over LinkedIn to Michael and introducing myself and just wanting to make that connection, which I thought was so important, because I felt like we shared so many values. And as it came into my, I guess, immaturity or maturity of leadership, that this made so much sense. And so I did. So I reached out to Michael over LinkedIn thinking is he going to think I'm a nutball, or is he going to get back to me? And it wasn't long, Michael. I don't know the amount of minutes, but it wasn't days. I can tell you it was that same day that you reached out to me, and I was so excited. You're like, hey, is there an opportunity to connect? And I'm like, here is my cell phone. Let's talk. And from that point forward, and that goes back, you might have the timestamp on it, Michael.
I do.
Okay. So share that, Michael. I think that's really important, because I can talk about after this what I went through for that remaining of time before we came together.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an awesome story. It goes from, really close friend and fishing buddy, hands you a book, connected both sides. And it's remarkable. But this was on May 24th. So it was right before Memorial Day weekend, which we could talk a little bit about that too. But it was at 12:13 Central Time. And you sent a message basically giving kind of the synopsis that you just did, about a little bit about your career background and then the crazy connections. And you put your cell phone number on there. And it was at 1:37, so a little under 90 minutes. I got back to you and said, this is wild. are you free for a phone call, whatnot? And you said, exactly, it's really nuts. Anytime, I'm free now. And so I'm pretty sure I just picked up the phone and called you less than 90 minutes after you sent that message. And kind of the rest is history. We'll get into some of those next steps, but that was really special. And when I got this message first and I saw Ryan Tucker, because, you were talking about last name, Leytem, and being familiar, I saw Ryan Tucker and I'm just like, who's this guy on LinkedIn? Tucker, it's probably a pretty common last name. It didn't cross my mind at all that it would be the Tucker from Cascade, Iowa, or related in that vein. So yeah, we got chatting and we started talking, of course, about fishing and leadership. And you told me this story that you shared there. And then we actually went on a family trip down to Table Rock on Memorial Day weekend following this. Mm-hmm. And you went above and beyond, and you were giving me like graphs of different spots to fish, different lures to throw. It was just incredible how we hit it off right off the bat. So I'll pause there because the nature of this relationship continues to grow and leads to a really cool place where we're at now in the present reality. But I was kind of blown away by it too, and knew that in my gut, I got to continue fostering this relationship and figure out what we're going to do next with it.
Yeah. So at this point in the story, we get it, right? We see that there's this crazy connection that Michael and I somehow were connected to Ryan. And actually, we are all related in some way. And we had never met each other. Well, apparently, Ryan and I were at the same wedding and funeral, 15, 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, but that we didn't know about until very recently, right? So you guys have this conversation, you connect in May of 2022, okay? And you continue to connect throughout the summer, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like if people understand me, like if I'm very interested, which most of the time I am, and very interested personally in people, like I'm not going to let that relationship that just got like made in that function, like, so I'm going to be pretty loud about it. So sending the pictures of the graphs and sending the picture of like, hey, I'm going to help you, like, selfishly, that was my, like, I wanted to give that to Michael. So like I was giving to get, the relationship to start to be built. Right. And that's very important to me. But yeah, I think, like over that time, we just consistently just touch base, right? Like, what's going on? Here's a fish picture. How's business? These type of things. And you just ping things and we would talk every once in a while, but we just kept that door of communication fluid. And it wasn't every day, but it was consistent. I'll say that over, at least a couple times a week, I'd hear from him or he'd hear from me. And it was really, really nice.
What is also cool, and I think we need to share it, is just even the memories that you have, Ryan, of Alicia's father, Russ. I mean, growing up, you saw him like play football.
He was an idol to me.
Yeah.
He was an idol to me when I was a young boy in Fort Dodge, Iowa, because my dad would take me up to watch his football games. And I just thought that he was just this monster of a man. And I was just like, at some time I'm going to be on this field, like looking like Russ Otting. Like, honestly, like I remember walking up and like, those are like the times when you're a child and you're like, these memories of it's cold, you're getting the hot chocolate, you're seeing, like Russ in his uniform, and you're like, these guys are monsters, right? Like, so like, those are all moments of like in my head to remember Alicia's dad by, right? Which is nuts in its own self. Yeah, absolutely.
This is crazy that they were just in the same town. So if you guys are a little confused, me and Michael, when Michael and I are not related, but we are from the same, our families are from the same small town. Okay. And so then Michael and I actually met in college. And so my dad is from his family is from the small town. So there's just a lot of like connections of, my dad is in high school, and when he's playing football, then Ryan's also from, his family's from the town. So he ended up being there. So there's just all these like little, major connections from this same small town. Okay.
Well, even on that note, I mean, Ryan and I, when we were hitting things off, just kind of talking back and forth, we would talk about fishing the river in downtown Cascade, Iowa, and both like just sharing, not at the same time, but there was still a piece of that, awesome, beautiful little fishery there, the little Maquoketa River that goes through there, or South Fork Maquoketa River, I think it is, or is it North Fork, whatever it is. But be able to be in the same spot, in the same, mental framework of having fun, catching fish, like you just don't get that with business acquaintances that you are trying to do business with or trying to make connection with, being like, oh yeah, you fished that little pocket water that I used to fish as a little boy growing up. Oh yeah, know it really well. Like that's just special, right? It was to me, at least.
It is incredibly special. I think, folks that are listening, like, have these little moments of connection. But it goes so much deeper between you and I, because when we talked about it, we fished the same area on that little spot, walking down those same stairs. We walked by, and folks that are listening won't know these names, but when you think of Reen Lightheart, right, which was Reen Leytem and Millie's sister and your grandfather's sister, right? Like all of those connections, you mowed the lawn for R.L. Tucker, right? Like all these connections where we never met, right? And, we're probably 10 years apart, right? And I'm older, but it's that, like, you appreciated all the same things that you went through as a child, right? Growing up in the outdoors and all the, like everything that you went through that I did, right? 10 years prior, from the same area, and when you put all that together, you can't ignore it. That's the thing that I always say is like, you can't ignore this kind of like bringing this all together. And I sit there and my grandma Tucker was my biggest supporter, right? She just was. She loved basketball. I was a big basketball player. She loved to fish. She loved to take me out there. She loved to make me pancakes for days, like on a Saturday morning, like she just loved on me. And I feel like she is somewhere saying, do not ignore this connection, because I connected you on purpose. And oh, by the way, I connected you through a person that I respect and I admire, through Ryan Heisey and his family. Like that, he's a great friend. He's a tournament partner of mine. There's a reason that I've selected him, because he's a good man, right? And for that to come through that channel, and Ainsley Heisey and Ryan Heisey, like, you just can't ignore it. And I couldn't stop thinking about it from the time that we had our last discussion before getting into the whole catching leadership part of it. I won't go into that now. I might be getting into it a little bit early.
No, I think you need to get into it, because we haven't actually said like what the really big news is and what's actually, what the outcome of this is. So you guys continue to talk over the summer. What were you doing, Ryan, and what was going on in your life?
Yeah. So I was the director, active director of sales for Simpler, an incredibly dynamic company, great company, that was growing significantly, went through a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I was the director over the West team of account executives, if you will. I had a great team. I loved them all. But I was in that kind of period in life where I was looking to potentially make more of an impact in something that I had a passion and love around. And that was in the outdoors kind of fishing industry, if you will. And so that passion and this connection all started to mold together. And in my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about it and be like, all right, I need to go explore this. Well, Michael, one day, and I think you texted me, Michael, and you were talking about how you have a focus around, from a retreat standpoint, I think is around the trout fishing aspect, but you didn't want to forget and leave out the bass fishing industry. And you had some ideas around some, a guy, and if you don't mind me mentioning, but a gentleman that you fished with was your team partner at University of Iowa's bass club team, Bob Downing, who's an elite series angler, about how you engage him to do some things for catching leadership. And in that moment, I said, you know what? I think you need to hire me. I don't know what his reaction was, because we were on the phone together But it was that moment where I was like, I'm just going to say what's I'm feeling, and I want to come aboard Catching Leadership. And there's all kinds of things that we need to iron out. But I'm either going to go after this career from a fishing standpoint, I'm just going to go alone, or I'm going to do something really special. And there is no type of, like, in my mind, I was like, we're not going to get uncomfortable at all about this. We're going to do this, and we're going to do this the best way we possibly can. I don't care about the money part of it. I don't care. Like, we will figure all of that out at some point, but I believe in what you're doing. I'm a believe in what Alicia's doing. And I believe that this is the career path that I want to take at this point. And I want to go get after it. Right. I'm 46 years old. And I was like, this is all coming together, like, and it's blowing my mind. So let's go after it.
So a couple things on that. I do remember you saying, like, I want to come work for you or whatnot. And I didn't know if you were serious or not, but it was like very heartfelt when you said that. But back to kind of the origin of all this, when I wrote Catching Leadership, it was still very much from a bass fishing lens. So I was on the University of Iowa bass fishing team. I got connected to Bob Downey. Love it. Love fishing, bass fishing with my brother, my dad, and still do today. And can't wait for us to actually get to go out on your boat, Tucker, and go make some memories, talk strategy, talk sales, talk all things Catching Leadership, and make some awesome memories. But over the kind of evolution of like my own development, if you will, if you kind of use a leadership development parallel, it wasn't that I wasn't enjoying bass fishing. I still was, but I was kind of getting called in some other directions when we were out in California. And there was a local fly fishing guide out there who, again, kind of follow the signs, follow the omens. The individual who delivered us like farmers market vegetables each week, he's like, you got to check out this guy locally. He is a really cool guy. I think you guys could help one another out. This was exactly about 2 years ago when we just had our daughter Melrose. And I remember being up late at night when you're rocking a small child, and I'm just like a junkie for YouTube videos on fly fishing, because in some ways there's a lot of parallels because it is still fishing, right? And in some ways you're a complete novice again. And that curiosity just got me so hungry. So I ended up just kind of going all in and being like, hey, fly fishing is like my new passion. And that's where I really want to go with some of these experiences, because I think it kind of puts people on a level playing field. You have to be so much more observant. You go to some really cool, beautiful places. Not that you don't with bass fishing, but there's just, it's a different monster. Sure. So anyway, I go pursue that. But in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking like, well, don't just close the door on the bass fishing industry, man. Like, remember where you came from, all the fun times you had. And there's a lot of money, there's a lot of products, there's a lot of sponsorships, there's a lot of relationships and connections. And I'm like, well, and we'll get into more of this yet, but as we continue to build out Catching Leadership, I can still focus on the fly fishing component, and maybe Tucker can be kind of the bass fishing guru. And as we do future events or as we talk to different audiences, this just helps us grow in brand new ways. And I still am determined to get you out with the fly rod too. So we'll have to do a little 50-50. I come out and do some bass fishing with you. You come out and do some fly fishing with me.
Listen, for the listeners, I am not against fly fishing. I've just spent way too much money on the bass fishing stuff. And I know how much money it costs to get into the fly fishing. So it's more fear that I'll love it and then like have to go spend all that money over there too. So it's a fear thing. So if I can use your gear, I'm in. I'm totally
it's done, man, done.
Oh my gosh. So I love this, but I want you to tell me what happened after Ryan said you should hire me. What happened next?
So I'm thinking naturally, as an entrepreneur, like, how do you make this work? Right. So like, do I bring him on as like, maybe he could be like a bass fishing guide / executive coach, and he could kind of work a different area. Maybe, over the course of a couple of years, I can save up some money and I can, bring him on at the capacity that I, would be able to be parallel of where he's at right now. Because we still are a small organization. We're doing really well, and we're going to continue to do, even better now with what we're positioned with the resources that we have. But with that being said, you can't, just because you like someone or just because there's a connection, you can't just go make promises that you can't cash the check for. So I was trying to give it some honest thought, and, it was kind of like one of these things of, well, if an opportunity arises, maybe we can work something out, but let's just kind of slow play it. But we were sending text messages back about, like fishing lures, spots, tournaments. And, I'm looking at it from two ways, actually. One way is knowing the profession that Ryan Tucker's in and the connection he has. I mean, he's a wonderful guy. He'll never say it because he's too humble, but he's got awesome relationships with people. He's got a big heart. And I'm like, if this guy can make a couple introductions for catching leadership within his own network with some of his fishing buddies, especially in the Kansas City market, which I don't have a ton of relationships in, I'm like, that would be golden. And, maybe there's some kind of referral fee or bonus or something that we could start there. And then things got really interesting when he did say, well, what if it's in a slightly different capacity? And I like, really come work for you. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about what that might actually look like and whatnot. And then all of the story that has built up to this point about it being about something bigger and having the faith in this and knowing it's really right in our heart, in our mind, body, and soul, and being like, we're going to figure this out and kind of build the plane as we fly it. Of course, Tucker is going to be getting paid for his work. It's not like he's doing this pro bono, but he's also at this position in his career where he's like, I want to do something that is so purposeful, that speaks to my soul in volumes. And he thinks that he has found it here at Catching Leadership. I know that he has, but I want him to get to experience, and I'm excited for us to grow it organically in whatever way it takes us. So, I mean, I'm just incredibly grateful. And I've enjoyed working. It's only been a month and a half so far that you've kind of joined the team, and that's even a crazy story we have to come back on when we first met in person.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to go next.
Well, I'll pause there first, though. If Tucker, if you want to say anything else to the points that I just made, and then we'll go into the first meeting.
I think you nailed it. I don't need to add anything, like just to talk. I think you nailed it. That's exactly how this all kind of came about. But I will say, like, just to kind of tee up the next part of this is like, we needed to meet in person, right? I was like, hey, before we go, I have to meet both of you. And I'm happy to drive to Dubuque, Iowa, right? Like from Kansas City and do our deal. And you were gracious enough to put me up in a beautiful bed and breakfast, but I'll stop.
Oh man, that's when the story starts to get interesting.
Oh geez. So I think it was it October? All of a sudden, Michael's starting to tell me like that him and Ryan are talking about potentially bringing Ryan on to Coaching Leadership and what this could look like. And we're kind of talking it through. And then all of a sudden, Michael turns to me one day. He said, so Ryan just put in his 2 weeks and he's going to come work for us now. Like, it's done. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And we do need to meet him. And I guess he threw out a date that was like the week later. Okay. Yeah. So we found this cute little Airbnb.
Awesome.
Or no, bed and breakfast.
It was yeah.
And put Ryan up in it so that we could go out and meet him. Okay. So on this night, this ended up being like about a month ago at this point, right? About a month ago. So we go, and how do we explain this beautiful?
I'll do it. I'll try and do it the best I can. So if Alisha and I on a personal level, we're not really much for like just going to a cookie cutter kind of hotel. Like, we want an experience, right? Life is about experiences. Some experiences are better than others, but like when you're going to stay somewhere, when you're going to go on a trip or whatever, like it's important that it's memorable and that it's nice and different and unique. So we wanted to provide that to Ryan. And so we kind of got a recommendation of a place locally, and it is a beautiful place. It's actually Four Mounds is the place. It's in Dubuque, and we look forward to doing some future events there, actually, from a Catching Leadership standpoint. But it just so happened to be that this place is it's a bed and breakfast, and if you haven't been to a bed and breakfast, they are a little bit different than like checking into a hotel. And so it is tucked away in the Driftless area, which is a beautiful part of eastern Iowa there, where there's rolling hills, and it's right along the Mississippi River, the big kind of valley, nice overlook. But it was a little bit later in the evening, so it's getting dark because the days are shorter, and there's a little tiny lane that you actually turn into. So you've got this on your GPS, like, oh, okay, I'm here 4 miles, and you're turning in here. And Tucker, of course, he's driving a truck, right? Because he does a lot of outdoorsy activities, and he's got to haul his boat and whatever. So he's like, pulling in here and can even fit in this truck up this little tiny lane. It's got all kinds of twists and turns. And there's like a shed that's kind of a creepy looking shed off to the side when you're going up there. And he gets up, and it's this beautiful old mansion from like the late 1800s. It's just breathtaking. building. And I'll let Tucker take over from here. So you get out of the truck, you're walking in. What is your experience like before we even walk in and meet you?
Oh, for sure. So, well, one, I had never stayed in a bed and breakfast before, ever. So I pull up this lane and I'm driving through, and it was one of those days, like, if the folks, anybody like understand this, especially from Iowa, like the clouds are rolling in, it's really kind of low ceiling, it's dark, it's like, it's getting dark, and I'm coming up and I'm kind of into the haunted movie deal. I'm like, this place is completely haunted, right? In a good way. So this place is so nice. And so I get around and I come up and I see this beautiful mansion. Never have stayed in a bed and breakfast, but I just anticipate like there's going to be a like front room where you check in. Nope. For all the people that know bed and breakfasts, they know that doesn't happen. So I'm just like kind of sitting there going, hello, right? And then just a woman that's working there, and she was a treat. She was really, really sweet, and she showed me to my room, and it was beautiful. The whole experience was absolutely, it was great. I would do it over, and I would do it over again in a heartbeat. I just had never experienced it, so it was completely new to me. But then I'm like, okay, so now Alisha and Michael are coming. I've never met you, and you have those like kind of like a little bit nervous butterflies, like how is this going to go down? We're going to be meeting in this like great room over here, but it was great. It ended up working out perfect.
So we pull up, and this is actually our first time there too. We'd heard good things, try to get him like the master suite, and try and make his first impression with Catching Leadership and Alisha Leytem Wellness, like a really good one. And so we roll up, and the first thing we notice, like, oh, there's no other cars here. Oh man, like, well, there's the Missouri plate, the Kansas City plates, and you're just kind of thinking like, okay, well that's his truck for sure. So we walk in, and no one is there. So this huge mansion with all this like vintage stuff in it.
It overlooks the Mississippi too, and there's like a lot of land, and weddings are hosted there. My last retreat that you guys have heard me talk about here on the podcast was almost hosted there, but we weren't able to because of like timing. So all these like beautiful events are there, but it was pitch black because it's November, and it's we couldn't see those things, and so it's all of our first time there, and all we see is a house. And no one's there except Ryan Tucker waiting for us to
get there. I don't know if we texted each other or what, and like he came out and we like shook hands and gave hugs and just like nice to meet you and whatnot. And selfishly, I wanted to go in and just kind of see the space, because if we were ever going to host a retreat or an event there, like what kind of common areas and whatnot do they have? So we kind of just scoped around. Beautiful stuff, tons of history, like we've said. Of course, when you're the only one in a huge mansion by itself and it's dark, you definitely get a little bit of those eerie vibes a little bit, but in a good way, right? That's just kind of the way old things are. But anyway, you go where what we decided to do was to go into one of the commons room and have like a big piano and whatnot. We sat down and we had just a really good heart-to-heart transparent talk. And if Alisha and I, and the way that we're trying to grow and run our businesses, like we just really value authenticity. And we just want to make sure that we're not just talking big game, but that we can back it up and that we all can get behind the same vision. And we might not know exactly how this is all going to pan out, but if our heart and our minds and our souls are all aligned on like what we're trying to do and the impact that we're trying to have, we can figure out the small stuff. We can figure out the tactical stuff. We just wanted to make sure that there was great alignment. And we started sharing stories, and we started talking about, some of the financial aspects of it and, some of the growth stuff of it. But it was just such a great conversation to have in person. And I'm so glad that Tucker was the one who recommended to meet in person. And that's something that I think, Alisha, you talk about on your show, and I know that I talk about it from a leadership standpoint, but that social connection piece. Sure, we could have had a Zoom call. We could have, met in person at a different time. But I knew that you were serious, Tucker, when you recommended that. And you wanted to meet in person, and we wanted to just really, forge this bond as a unit. So we have a great conversation in there, but we really wanted to kind of wine and dine and take them to a nice restaurant in downtown Dubuque. So after we had that conversation,
well, I want to chime in because I remember Tucker said something during that conversation that really still sticks with me. That gave me goosebumps of all these connections that we're talking about, right? So like Michael said, we were talking the stories, and that's when Ryan and I realized that we were both at the wedding and the funeral. because I don't know if we mentioned, but so my grandma, Madonna Otting, was married to R.L. Tucker, which is Ryan's grandpa. And they got married, in their 70s and 80s. And then 5 years later, they died in a car accident together. So it was very sudden, very sad. But so we were at their funeral together. And so we're really understanding these like crazy connections. And Ryan just looked at me and Michael, and he was like, I genuinely believe that I was sent here to help you guys. And I think that you can help me find my passion too. Like I get goosebumps thinking about it right now. It's like moments like that where it's just complete synchronicity. And like, you cannot deny the universal signs and like the divine guidance that is being intervened, and we looked around, we're like, okay, I think RL and Madonna are here right now. We get it. We hear you. Now let's go eat. Okay, let's go out and have some food. And at one point I was like, man, Ryan, I just can't wait for you to meet my dad. My dad like loved, RL, who was his stepdad. And, of course he misses his mom. And I just felt like when he could meet Ryan, like he could feel this connection to his mom and his stepdad again. Right. And so I just couldn't wait for them to meet. And I had mentioned that before we went out to the dinner. Right. Yeah. So we head off to the dinner, and we end up having to wait for our table for about an hour. So we're sitting there just having our, happy hour drink, waiting for our table. And all of a sudden the host brings us back to go sit down. So I'm walking back. It's the first time we're at this restaurant, and I turn the corner. All of a sudden there's this long table in the back, and I do a double take because at the end of the table, I see my dad, and I'm like, oh my, is that my dad eating at this restaurant right now? So I go up there, and it is my dad there with his friends, and my mom's there too. And so Ryan and my dad got to meet right then. And I get chills again right now. I'm like, okay, listen, we get it, you guys. RL, Madonna, we get it. Thank you for the confirmation. But they got to meet, and it's just wild. Like, could it be any more clear?
That was crazy, because we were talking about like, at some point you're going to get connected with Ruskin. Maybe we'll go out fishing or in the next trip or whatnot. And to have it happen, I think, again, to what Alisha said, it's just like, it's like in the book, The Alchemist, follow the omens. And sometimes those signs are just glaring in the face. And I know that there's some people out there who could be skeptical, and they say, oh, it's just a bunch of coincidences. It's like, you ask any of us three if it's coincidence, and we're like, nope. We know what this is, and we know that we have to enact on it and have faith in it because it is so special and unique.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I probably on my side, like throughout my life, I'd probably like steer a little bit to like not following those signs a little bit, just being a little bit more cautious. And but this was too strong for that. And I want to go back just for a quick second, because as I was going through my like leadership role within my past company, like I loved my team and I really enjoyed what I did. And Simpler is going to go on to do great things without me. There's no question. And I was really fortunate and grateful over that time, and the past employers to be around really dynamic leaders that I learned from. But this is something that I absolutely couldn't ignore, and I knew that going back to that Memorial Day when this came, like it was something that was always like in the background of my think as I was thinking about it. And then it just started to grow and grow and grow and grow to the point where I'm like, I'm not going to let an opportunity like pass me by or pass us by without actually taking the shot and asking you and Alisha to go do something, right? And if it didn't work, that's okay. Like in terms of like, if you guys weren't interested, but in my mind, if I don't make that ask. But the most important thing for me was that if I'm to that point and I'm really willing to go make that jump, then I'm not fully invested in my team. It's not about me, but I wasn't fully invested in my team. And when I called you and I said, hey, Michael, I resigned, it was because my head was somewhere else. Right. And I couldn't do that to the 4 people that I directed because I had too much respect for them. And candidly, I had too much respect for myself to say that I'm not just going to mail this in and go try to find something else. This all made sense to me, right? So I had confidence the fact that this is going to work, but I'm not going to mail it in, especially we're going into the last quarter. They're going to go figure that out. I'm going to keep in great contact with all the folks over there, but let's go do something special. And if not, I'll go find something else. So I want to make sure that I mention that it was just so natural for me. And I had so much confidence that it wasn't, some people are very fearful of taking risks and very conservative. I would maybe put myself in that class. For some reason, I didn't feel that because I was drawn to it just emotionally and spiritually through like all of these connections. I was like, there is no wrong move here for me. This is all feels too good.
Well, I applaud you having the courage to do that in your career, because a lot of people will wait until it's too late. I mean, Alisha talks about all the time when it comes to stress and burnout and not maybe feeling fulfilled, or just you're stuck, right? You just need something new, and it's nothing bad about the company or the people, whatever. It's just sometimes you need something new, and you got to ask those reflective questions, and then opportunity comes knocking and you jump on it. But another thing I want to just touch on is, Tucker, as much as, this transition and opportunity for you to grow and be part of the team and help Alisha and myself out with our businesses, it's forcing us to grow too. It's forcing me to grow as a leader. And I have plenty of room for growth as a leader. I'll be the first one to tell you that. You don't just write a leadership book and then you become an expert. You never have to grow yourself. So as I was thinking about the business and trying to grow it in this incremental, stepwise fashion, bringing a person like you on, who I respect a lot, who I know has great tenure, has great skill set, who's going to hold the team accountable, hold myself accountable, and help grow this thing, it can be scary in a good way, right? Like, what if we do actually start growing really rapidly? Are you ready for this, Michael? Are you ready to lead a dynamic, diverse team where you might not have as much control? And that's where having faith in yourself and in the process, and not needing the control in every little area of your life, but just saying, I'm going for it. Let's roll the dice together.
Yeah.
Let's do it, man. And let's both grow and have fun as we do it. We will make mistakes. There's no doubt we will make some mistakes. Yeah. We're going to have a hell of a lot of fun doing it. And we're going to help a ton of people as we do it. And, someday, 10, 20, 30 years from now, we look back, we're on a fishing boat together and we're laughing about this call, right? Remember that first podcast that we did? At least we told this great story. Like, it's just so cool to get to make these memories with both of you, really.
Yeah.
I love this story so much because I want to chime in about taking that leap of faith, because I second what Michael said. I commend you, Tucker, for doing that, because that is like one of the biggest fears that most people in life have, right? Is following your dreams and taking that quote unquote leap of faith, because it's diving into the unknown and you don't really know what's going to happen. I personally think that you never know what's going to happen in any position and role that you're in. There's something called a false sense of security, right? But we still feel that that's like the safe, quote unquote, thing to do. But I think the most unsafe thing you can do is not following your heart, because if you don't do that, that's when your soul starts to shrivel. And that's when you begin to burn out, because you're trying to push and force yourself to do something that you're not in alignment with anymore, And so when you can snap yourself out of that and put yourself on a path that, yeah, that transition is difficult and it is scary, but your heart feels alive and your soul feels on fire, that's the path you need to be going down. And that's when you have endless energy to do the thing, because you're not forcing it. You're not trying to like get yourself behind it. You are behind it because that's who you are. And so I love that this is part of the Catching Leadership story, and we get to be a part of it with you, Alisha Leytem Wellness, because it just shows the power of following your dreams and doing it scared.
Yeah, it's really special. It's really cool. And my mind runs wild with all the ways that we can implement things and what we're going to do. And I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly what we're doing, in 2023 or 2024, 2025, and how we build this thing and grow. But I'm going to listen more than I try and talk when it comes to listening to you, Tucker, and your experiences. And I feel like that blend, and also the team too. I know we're kind of making it about us three, but we have some awesome people around us. Like our team.
Really talented, very talented. My first month, incredibly talented, driven, accountable, like just great personalities that want to see success, right? And that's where it becomes, in my mind, when we're small, but we're all pointed towards the goals, right? And the success. But we all understand, like it all comes down to, and I was going to go back to this, as long as we communicate appropriately, we will be so far above and beyond where some large organizations get. And you've seen this within your experience, Alisha, you've seen it within your experience in terms of how they get built and stacked and leadership models, and all of a sudden communication starts to break down. And I think that we're just at a really good place right now based on our size to where we can communicate in an appropriate way and be open and say what works, what doesn't work. There's no feelings hurt. We're trying to build something in a way that makes sense for catching leadership, right? Like if you build really fast, you're going to miss some steps. So that might not be the model, and that's okay, right? But we're going to do it how Michael Leytem, Alisha Leytem, and the team, like how we all come together, say this is the best way to go do it. And if we communicate about that, which we do, which I've seen we do on a weekly basis, it will be successful.
It totally will be. And I always, Alisha and I have this talk all the time, because as entrepreneurs, you do want to like kind of keep your pedal to the metal. Like you always want to push yourself to go farther, and you do have to work hard, and you got to be scrappy and all those things. But it doesn't motivate me to grow just for growth's sake from a monetary standpoint. I get very inspired to grow personally, professionally, like actually growing my skill sets, my awareness, my perspective. But we're not racing to go public and sell this company. We want to have a long runway that we grow in a sustainable way, that we get to do very impactful work. And to do that, I would rather go a little bit slower, perhaps, or say no to certain things, or build the right relationships and do it the right way, than 10 years from now, I'll be like, well, we have a boatload of money, but you're just replicating what you said was wrong out there with everything. Like, we don't want to do that. And just to name drop a little bit on the team too, because they deserve it. Caitlin Alford, you go above and beyond. You're awesome. Brooke Barber, you've been doing an incredible job as well as an intern, and Monica Ragsdale too. Thank you, all three of you, for stepping up and doing what you do. I know Alicia's got her team members too, but honestly, it does take a team. It does take a village. And as we continue to grow, we'll get to expand the boat, the Catching Leadership boat, right? And get to work together as a team. Bringing Tucker on board is just another captain of this ship who can help guide us do that.
Yeah, I love it. I think that this is hopefully inspiring people in many different aspects of the story, right? Whether it's being inspired from Ryan's leap of faith of recognizing and realizing that his heart wasn't in his current role anymore, and it was time to move on and actually do something to do that, to move on, or whether it's seeing the signs that the universe is guiding you on and accepting those signs, and not, pushing them aside and saying, oh, that's just coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence personally. And I think the story can attest to that for us all. But then also for other entrepreneurs, right? And the kind of behind the scenes of this story and what it kind of takes to be doing this type of work. I really want to commend Michael for saying, like, what are we growing? What are we doing, and why? And this is actually part of the conversation that us three had when we all met together for the first time, was what's our ultimate vision. And one thing that Michael and I are really about is making sure that our lifestyle our passions, we still have time to do our passions, right? We still have time to like live the life that we want, and not just going just for the sake of going, where then all of a sudden you're like, is this what I'm actually wanting to build? And so being really conscious of, making sure that we can build and help the people, but also live the life that you want to live. You know what I mean? Like, isn't that the ultimate definition of success? I think so. I'm excited to have you on board, Ryan. I think it's going to be awesome.
I'm so excited to be here. I really am. And this is fun. It's fun talking about it, right? And so like you get a little nervous. You're like, wait, I'm on a podcast, but it comes a little bit, well, I don't know if it's going to come off naturally, but I just love telling the story. Every time I tell it, it's fun. It's really good to see you too, Alisha. Like I get to see Michael all the time. So it's good to see you. I'm excited. I'm excited for everybody to have a great holiday season, right? To take a little bit of breath, and to be able to enjoy family and friends. I think that's incredibly important. And then you recharge the batteries and you get after it in January. So I look forward to great things in 2023 with Catching Leadership, and making new connections out there in the world for sure.
Yeah. Thank
Absolutely.
you, Tucker, for everything that you've already done to this point. And I am excited to grow and to work with both of you. I mean, we do have an event on January 11th where we are the facilitation team, because it's kind of this
All
beautiful
three of us.
blend. It's a healthcare client. So that's where Tucker's got a lot of the experience in. They want some mindfulness, well-being stuff. So that's where Alisha really ties in. And then the overview of it is it's for their leaders. So it's a leadership development program. So it's like, yeah, this is perfect, right? We get to be ourselves. We get to do the work that we love, and we get to tell it in the way that we want to. Like, yeah, it is still work, and we do have to show up and go do a good job, which we will, but it just feels different to me. I don't know. I've presented a lot and facilitate a lot of programs, but there is something special cooking here. So I echo what you say. This next year is going to be really, really fun. So Alisha, thanks for having me back on. Hopefully I did an okay job for you again. We don't have to wait as long for you to invite me back to the next one. I was starting to get a little nervous there. She hasn't asked me to be on in a little bit.
You know, it's gonna be wild if she invites me before she invites you again. Like, hey, Tucker, I'd like to have you back on. Like,
I would take that back. I mean, I probably would, because the response after this episode, like the downloads are going to go way up, and she'd say, wow, there's something about Tucker. I'm going to bring him back on the show. And here next year around this time, maybe she'll roll around to inviting me back.
Well, I remember first season, I was like, please come on my show, Michael. And then we had to get you on, and now you're just begging to be back on because I have so many new guests coming on.
Well, I have a lot to say. I always do. I mean, you know me, you know I always have a lot to say. But yeah, seriously, hopefully I can actually get on an episode and lead. But anyway, this was great today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening to all the cool work we're doing. Alisha, thank you for having the podcast.
Yeah,
there's a lot of time and effort that goes into it. Ainsley, thank you for everything you do with editing the podcast and continuing to promote it and get it up there. So Alisha, if you have any final plugs here, but thank you for taking the time and making this platform available for us to share this story.
Yeah, thank you, Alisha. Yep, I second that.
Absolutely. It's been really fun and a big learning lesson, and it's one of my favorite parts of my week is getting to connect with other people, and learn about the story and inspires others through it, So with that, I would like to share all of our information, our links. We've been talking about LinkedIn. We talk about LinkedIn every episode, you guys. So go connect with us over there. We'll have Ryan's LinkedIn to connect with him, Michael's to connect with him, mine. You can head to catchingleadership.com to learn more about what they're offering. And then, of course, AlishaLeytem.com as well. Michael's book, Catching Leadership, is available on Amazon. And my book, The 6 Gold Keys to Wellbeing, is also available on Amazon. And it's 50% off through the end of December. So if you want to grab that before the end of the year to help you kick off 2023 with some strategy and ending the overwhelm to really improve your overall well-being, that would be a good move for you. And of course, we are still open enrollment right now for our coaching and community program called Your Wellbeing Promotion, which you can check out on my website, alishaleytem.com. But thank you guys so much for being here today. I'm sure we'll be back, and please feel free to follow along with our story. Reach out to us and schedule a call if you'd like to learn anything more. Thanks, you guys, so much for being here.
See ya.
Thank you.